Welcome to the Film It VFX Studios YouTube channel and the Talks Podcast Show.
Okay, go on the Muppets. That sounds pretty exciting.
Let's watch cat videos. Yeah.
Welcome to another podcast show, Talk Podcast Show. I'm honoured to have in the house Mr. Tom Devlin. He is a world-renowned SFX makeup artist and also the owner and curator, I think that's the right word, of the Tom Devlin Monster Museum in Nevada. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're right at Las Vegas in Boulder City, Nevada.
Yeah, I watched a video last week. I think it's a Grim Life collective.
Oh, yeah.
Went over to you and visited, and it just looks amazing. So, how did it all begin for you, sir? I mean, you've got a hell of an amount of film credits to your name.
Yeah, it all started really young. I was very into like comic books and fantasy. I think starting with like He-Man and Ninja Turtles as a kid, and I just found a love for characters and creatures. And in high school, I met a guy named Bill Frazetta, who was Frank Frazetta's son. And Frank Frazetta, for those who don't know, was a very famous fantasy artist. He did all the Conan the Barbarian stuff and Heavy Metal Magazine. And Bill Frazetta ran a shop called Frazetta's Fantasy Corner that was like a Halloween store. And while I grew up in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and that store was very close to my high school, and we would go hang out in there after school and buy like cool things. And I kind of started learning about makeup effects and makeup artists like Tom Savini and Rick Baker and Dick Smith. And one thing led to another. I'm very obsessive when I latch onto something, and I just became like obsessed with makeup effects and kind of knew it probably about 10th grade that was going to be what I wanted to do for a living.
And how old was you then when you first started that journey?
Probably I was like 15 when I discovered it and started working like in my bedroom and stuff.
Okay.
But I made the move to LA when I was 17, and from Pennsylvania to Los Angeles. And when I got there, I went to a makeup school, but I only took like the beauty makeup classes. And then when it came time for the makeup effects and special effects, they didn't have enough students signed up. So I ended up getting an internship at WM Creations, which was a big makeup effects shop owned by Matthew Mungle. And I went there to work for free for about 2 days. And then I got offered a full-time job, and I just stayed there. And my first job was on X-Files season 8. And
wow.
I worked on X-Files, and then that led right directly to a movie called The Scorpion King. And then there was a hiatus. Basically, when you work at these big shops, work dries up and everybody goes on unemployment and kind of disperses. And I went to Kansas City to make some money doing tree work, and I got a phone call from Matthew, and he said that I just needed to come back to LA because there was a movie called The Tuxedo starting with Jackie Chan and Jennifer Love Hewitt. And so I came back for The Tuxedo, and I was so relieved because I felt like I was part of the team at that point. And I'm only 19, at this point. And from The Tuxedo on, I stayed for about 2 years working on every project that came our way.
Awesome. So how you say your first job was the X-Files, then went on to the Scorpion King. Did that just sort of like happen by accident, or what was the sort of process? Did you sort of have to prove yourself, or?
It is the craziest thing because as a kid and a guy who said, "Oh, I'm going to go to Hollywood and be an effects artist," I was a little bit spoiled because it did work out that way. I went from trying to go to makeup school, not being able to go to the class. I didn't want to be a beauty makeup artist, so not being able to take the effects classes, and I just jumped on X-Files. Now, I only stayed there because I worked really hard. I worked my butt off, and the people liked me. I was the first one to show up and the last one to leave. I never complained about money or, it was, I wanted to do this. But looking back at it now, I'm 41. That doesn't happen. You don't just move to Hollywood and end up on the biggest television show that existed at that time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was crazy. I started on X-Files season 8, did 2 episodes, and then did Scorpion King. Then there was that hiatus that felt like it was over. You know, I thought it was over. And then I came back on the Tuxedo. Then we did Terminator 3, Charlie's Angels 2, Red Dragon, a whole season 9 of X-Files. I was on every episode. We did CSI Miami season 1 and 2. I mean, there was so much work. But the crazy thing is, I'd never moved to Los Angeles to be involved with these big movies and this big stuff. Like, I'm a little bit punk rock, you know, and I love Trauma and I love Full Moon. And I wanted to come to LA and make movies like Puppet Master. Was I was not as excited. I mean, it's weird thinking back about it. Like, I worked on Red Dragon, which was a huge movie with Anthony Hopkins and Ed Norton, you know. But that's not what I came to LA to do. It's hard to make sense of that, you know, but it's true. So I ended up leaving Matthews, and then I went and worked on Buffy and Angel with Rob Hall at Almost Human for a couple episodes of the last 2 seasons. And then I was offered a job by K&B Effects, which at the time was the biggest and still the biggest effects company doing horror stuff. And I turned it down because I didn't want to get stuck working for the man. I wanted to be the guy. I don't want to work for the guy. So in 2002, I started a company called 1313 Effects, which is still going strong today. My first feature film was a movie called Joshua that Fangoria distributed. And that was probably the greatest time of my life. And I made the best friends ever. And being the guy was what I always wanted to do. I wanted to be Tom Savini. I didn't want to work for Rick Baker, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that makes absolute sense. Absolute sense. I'm sort of, because I'm a film director myself, but I came from doing, because my forte is visual effects, digital visual effects. So I came from working on big TV shows and films. And, you know, I was in the sort of same, but I don't really want to work for that guy. I want to do something for me and be my sort of own person. And that's why Film at VFX Studio was born about 15 years ago. And funny, we shot our first low budget, near enough zero budget horror film back in 2019. And we're about to finish 2 more films this year and another film next year. So I totally get where you're coming from. So let me ask you, because obviously you go to a school, some sort of school, to learn the trade. Is that what happened with you? Did you go to a school to learn it, or was you more self-taught?
Really? So I was pretty self-taught up until I went to makeup school. But when I got to the makeup school, it was just makeup. Like, it was literal beauty makeup. Like, we didn't. I ended up teaching the class a little bit of like monster makeup, but the school I went to, you had to take the professional makeup artistry course, which it did include bald caps and beards and stuff, but for the most part, it was beauty makeup. And then the big heavy effects stuff, that's what I was there for, but they wouldn't let me take that until after I had graduated the 11-week program or whatever. And so, but when it came time for that special effects and there wasn't enough students, it just didn't make sense for me to hang around. And that's when I went and got the job. So I learned more on the job from the people around me. I had great mentors. Tim Considine, who created Toxic Avenger Part 4 and also worked for Trauma for years. Matthew Mungle, of course, an Academy Award winner for Bram Stoker's Dracula and many other things that has under his. Clinton Wayne, who has been an on-set guy for most movies of the late 90s, early 2000s. And even today, he works on Grimm, I think was the last. I mean, I had these great mentors around me, so I just soaked up all the knowledge I could get.
These are like legends as well, aren't they? You know, like legends of the industry.
Pretty much learn by watching and doing and faking it till you make it, as they say, because I never wanted to be replaced with somebody that knew what they were doing. So I just always tried very hard. And then when it came down to it, like I ended up teaching at Cinema Makeup School for 3 years, doing their effects program, which is funny because I never graduated high school, let alone makeup school, you know.
That's amazing. You know, hats off to you. That's an incredible story. But going into sort of like going back to your sort of first projects, I mean, did you sort of go into nervous? Did you go into them thinking, I hope I haven't sort of bitten off more than I can chew? Or was there a Tom there that was like really confident in what he was doing. Because I know a lot of makeup artists that would think their first job, the X Files, oh, I'm actually pooping myself at the moment.
I tell people a lot of times that my biggest superhero power, if I had a superhero power, is that I am able to jump into a pool without knowing if there's water in it. So I don't get nervous. I don't remember ever being nervous. I just remember like this is what I do. I show up and I do, and that's really what an effects artist does because we don't often do the same thing twice. Like I get a call from a director. He's like, I want a hammer to smash through the back of the guy's head, and I need the claw to come out of one eye and then pull it through. And I say, okay, I'd never done that before, but yeah, sure. That's what we do. We just make things that don't naturally happen. And there's not a textbook way to do everything, and for that fact, there's not a right or wrong way that someone else can tell you, as long as it works on screen and you're able to convey through the cameraman and the director what you're trying to achieve. Then so being nervous and like that anxiety of oh, is this going to work? Failure's not really an option. Like they got to make a movie, got to pull it off. So I remember stepping into on the X-Files thing the first day in a real workshop, first time I ever, there's famous faces all over the wall and big posters everywhere, and I mean I know the body of work these people encompass, and I'm just this kid, and it was funny, this guy Tim Considine, I was wearing a hat like this hat, but it had and it said Savini on it because I love Tom Savini. And Tim Considine, who's an effects artist, he's passed away now, but he came up to me and he goes, my name's Tom, obviously. And he's like, hey, man, you got an identity crisis? And I was like, no. And he's like, why are you wearing a hat that says Savini when your last name's Devlin? And I said, well, because I love Tom Savini. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't do this. And he's like, well, you're an effects artist now. Start wearing your own name on your hat. Yeah. And I thought that was so funny back then and kind of rude. But now I do wear my own name on my hat, like right there. And
proud,
and on stickers on my car, like it's an interesting thing because he was kind of right 20 years later. But yeah, there was no nervousness. I just didn't want to fuck up, but I don't remember being like anxious about that. Failure's not I moved to Hollywood to work on movies and I just had to do it. That's what, and that's how I feel about jobs today,
But do you have, I mean, I'm not saying you have pressure on the job, because as a digital effects artist, I do know I get sometimes, I think to myself, have I sort of bit off more than I can chew, sort of thing. Right. Is this project a bit too much for me to sort of handle because of the challenges? But going into, say, for instance, a low budget movie and a high budget movie like a Hollywood feature, would you feel sort of the same pressure on sort of both ends? Or
the crazy thing is, I've worked on both, the biggest of the big and the lowest of the low. I actually have a little bit more I wouldn't call it pressure or anxiety, but more like pride for the low ones, because these are typically, like with your low budget features you're doing, these are typically people that are just trying to make something. They want so badly to do it. There's no corporation behind them. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's their own money. Sometimes it's their family's money. Sometimes it's Indiegogo patrons' money, but that's still somebody's dream and goal. So I feel so honored with the responsibility, but also I feel like I have a mission to succeed so that these people feel like they hired the right person, and on the bigger budget, you're like, oh, this is Fox. Like, they'll be fine, you know what I mean? But at the same time, you don't want to ever practice any poor technique or phone anything in. But I can say what I learned working on those big movies at Matthew Mungall's, he runs his shop very differently than a lot of people. Like every episode of X-Files, we had about a week to create. Unless it was something huge like the Billy Miles suit, then maybe we'd do like 3 weeks. But typically we're working on the biggest budget show, but we handled it like it was an asylum movie. Like we moved so fast and with so much resources that were, in a thrifty kind of nature. And you'd get the older guys in the shop that would be bitching about why we're using such cheap materials or why we're cutting corners. But it was such good training for where I ended up in life. Like I've never, I don't often, I can't recall getting a job or a task that felt too big or like, oh gosh, how am I ever going to pull this off? I mean, I just figure you just got to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the way to go. So let me ask you, what has been your sort of biggest challenge? Your biggest challenge that you had to sort of face? Something you thought to yourself, I can't fucking deal with this no more. Do you know what I mean?
So
Probably a tough question because you've got a hell of a back catalogue.
there's two things I think of. In 2011, I had done like 7 or 8 full moon features for Charles Band, childhood hero, inspiration of why I'm there, and a lot of those feature films I did on like a handshake agreement that I would do the next Puppet Master movie, which I had not worked on yet. And I found out that he was using somebody else on the Puppet Master movie, and it was so disappointing. It like broke my ego and kind of broke
Yeah,
my trust, and I almost gave up. Like I moved to Florida that week. Like I packed it up and moved, and I was like, if I can't find the respect working for Full Moon, Full Moon was my childhood job,
yeah,
and I childhood dream. And if I couldn't find the respect after being there for 10 years, I'd been working with them, I think. Well, no, that's not true. 2007 to 2012, whatever that is. I'd been working for him for a while at the time, and I felt like I couldn't find the respect, even though I was giving my all to these zero budget movies, hardly making a living. And but then it's crazy because I packed up, moved to Florida, and not 2 weeks after being there, Charlie called me and he asked me to do the puppets, and he said he made a mistake, and it all worked itself out. And I've done 3 Puppet Master movies now, but that challenge of like having my ego hit was difficult. And the other biggest challenge I've reached in my career is a recent one. I have segued into directing and creating feature films of my own now.
mm,
I directed a movie called Teddy Told Me To, and then I followed it up with a movie called Las Vegas Frankenstein. I then shot a movie called Nameless that's still in post production, and in April I'm going to do a movie called The After Dark. And I've worked as an effects artist for so long. When I get booked at a convention, it's still legendary effects artist. It's very similar to this podcast. Legendary effects artist, effects artist, effects artist. But I'm trying to do a slight title shift. I don't want to forget that I'm an effects artist,
mm,
but I'm a filmmaker.
yeah.
I make effects. I do art department. I do everything. And I've added directing to that, and I love directing. I think it's somehow a natural progression of where I was headed the whole time, and I just had no idea.
You get a kick out of it. I get a kick out of it. I
Oh,
mean, we're in the middle of trying to recreate Critters, so we're trying to do our sort of own version of Critters based in sort of London. I'll show you one of the guys who got sort of made for us. I mean, he's not perfect, but I think
awesome.
so. We're going to so with your sort of experience, how would you make him more, bring him to life?
Let me get him bigger here. Is his mouth a puppet at all, or is it just
Yeah,
static?
he's a full blown puppet because I couldn't afford the animatronics, so his
Yeah.
mouth doesn't open great. He's made with quite a tough sort of latex
Yeah.
sort
But
of
that's
thing, but
just seeing him moving on the screen is the most important thing. Even side to side, like quick turns side to side, just turning your head back, like back and forth,
so
because
sort of,
just keeping him alive and moving, peering up, getting out of frame, coming around a corner, getting out of frame.
yeah,
It's and the biggest key is find yourself a puppeteer that knows how to make inanimate objects look real.
yeah,
Somebody who's actual puppeteer. It's not just somebody sticking their hand in a puppet. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It is insane to see a puppeteer bring that inanimate object to life. They could almost do it with a tissue box. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah. And what would you say about, because we're going to hit him with a little bit of blood, a little bit of moisture, just to give him
Yeah.
something. I want to do some. I've not done some screen tests, but all our pops we make in sort of house, and sort of like I look up to people like yourself, Tom Savini, just to try and do our sort of our own thing, 3D printing and stuff like that, and see, sort of put it in a sort of feature film scenario and see how it looks, and if it works, then we go from there. But I mean, we've only got one critter made for the film, but the plan is to sort of split him up, do some split screens with him, and make it look like there's loads of them. So
we just did a movie called Alien Storm here in Las Vegas, the Mahal Entertainment or the Mahal Empire production company I work for.
Yeah.
And made 4 full body creature suits, but we made those creatures look like there's 30 of them. You know what I mean? Just using them in different scenarios and having them cross frame and come back into frame. And it was really, really cool to see all these creatures come to life.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this one, there was a little bit of an error on him, because when I asked him, when I was talking to the creator of him, I wanted him to put removable hair, so some sort of Velcro attachment with the hair, so we could sort of take that off and reapply another sort of different coloured sort of styles of hair to make him look a bit more different.
Oh, yeah.
So he looks like a different critter all the time, but unfortunately, it wasn't sort of done like that. So I was a bit, so I'm gonna have to sort of figure that out as I sort of go along. So let me ask you. So, what was the film that really got you drawn into monster making? Got a feeling it was Puppet Master, but
Puppet Master was a big deal for me. But the Toxic Avenger came first. I was Toxie is my first love when it comes to that. And then the 1989 Ninja Turtles was really, really big for me.
Yeah.
The creature suits in Ninja Turtles are often looked over because people just think of them as live action toys. But when you watch the 89, the work that Henson did on those characters, second to none. Like they're doing maneuvers, they're emoting, they're talking, it's pretty captivating to watch those full body foam latex suits hold the movie, I also loved, of course, Labyrinth, Neverending Story, stuff like that as a kid. Like, that's all my favorite stuff. And then in high school or late middle school, it turned to Puppet Master, Ghoulies, and like horror. I love Friday 13th, Sleepaway Camp. I loved horror films all through high school. I was a very punk rock horror guy.
Yeah.
But before that, it was Neverending Story, Masters of the Universe, stuff like that. I loved fantasy.
My friend Mike Pill, he's a SFX artist. He works on Labyrinth.
My friend Mike Hill, just one of the most talented men in the planet.
Yeah. He did the little worms in Labyrinth years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Worm. So before we go, like, hit you with some little trivia questions. Okay, so let's do this. Favorite film?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Monster Squad, depends on the mood, but I love Monster Squad. Maybe Monster Squad over Texas Chainsaw. But Texas Chainsaw is my favorite horror film.
Okay, favorite director?
Ooh, that is tough.
That is tough, and I always get people with that one.
Oh,
I'll tell you what, you can have 2.
I can have 2.
That's a tough one.
Guillermo del Toro and Sam Raimi.
Guillermo del Toro. I've just been trying to recreate this, but not
Guillermo del Toro and Wes Craven. Wes Craven.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, listen, Tom, you're an absolute legend. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the museum you've got in Nevada? I am looking to come next year from London to visit.
So the Monster Museum is a love letter to horror, but what it really is my mission is to preserve the art and history of practical effects, starting in the silent film era, working all the way through modern time, and of course some stuff from my own personal career. Every artifact in the Monster Museum is a one-of-kind work of art. Nothing you can purchase anywhere, nothing you can get on eBay or something like that, or Spirit Halloween. It's all made by me, except there are a couple things that I have some guest artists, like my friend Justin Mabry sculpted one of the Jason heads that's in there. And then also I have the original Spider Gremlin there from Gremlins 2. That's not mine. It is on loan from my buddy Peter Stickles and Michael Carbonaro, who own it. And they just keep it at the Monster Museum. So everything in there is actual. Like there's nothing in there that you can see and be like, oh, I can go buy this. But it's really to educate people how important practical effects were. You know, I use Planet of the Apes as a
One, I love them.
as a example a lot of times, and I don't mean to offend you because I know you're a digital effects guy, but
Do you know what? But doing digital effects makes you, because all the films I'm doing at the moment, I'm saying I want practical. I want practical.
yeah,
I will
there's
only use digital to fix
there is
mistakes.
something so tangible about a practical effect where you can see it and remember it. And I think of Planet of the Apes a lot because right now I could draw Dr. Zaius or Zira or Cornelius. If I saw somebody in a cosplay, I could tell you which ape they are, if that's Aldo or whoever, you know. But for me to sit down and try to draw or sculpt Caesar or Bright Eyes from the digital Planet of the Apes, my brain doesn't register what they look like.
Mm.
I don't know. I can't honestly remember what their war paint looks like without looking them up. And I like those movies, but they just don't resonate the same with me. And I don't play a lot of video games, although I was heavily involved in I wouldn't say heavily. I was involved with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the video game.
Yeah.
That was an interesting thing. That was my closest thing to being involved with digital effects because I'm there helping Kane Hodder look like this childlike Gunnar Hansen Leatherface, and as he's performing, you can see it on the screen in front of him. It was absolutely incredible, you know. And so I don't hate digital effects. And what you just said, for cleaning things up, for fixing things, for removing wires from the puppets, or
That's right.
to even sometimes like I love compositing, you know. Oh gosh, there wasn't quite enough blood, let's composite some blood on top of that, or some stretchy slime or something, you know. I don't mind digital effects, but I don't want to lose what we had with Creature of the Black Lagoon and Planet of the Apes and Freddy Krueger, you know what I mean?
I watched that the other day, Creature of the Black Lagoon, and I haven't seen it in donkey's years, and I forgot how similar it is to Jaws.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you know,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like you just forget. You know, you just forget. And Jaws is my favourite film of all time. So,
Oh, Jaws is incredible.
yeah. So, anyway, Tom, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Oh, thank you for having me.
and let's hook up, and maybe we can get you create some creatures for our films
Oh, that'd
over
be
in the
great.
UK.
The other thing with those critters, put like a KY jelly in their mouth, slime in the mouth, you know.
Okay. What about the eggs? I've recreated the eggs. They're in the other room at the moment. I've recreated the eggs, and we've actually created a pump system that goes through with a little pump and a syringe. So when you inject it, it looks like they're sort of
That's
hatching.
awesome. That's
So,
awesome.
but when it's done, we would definitely get you having a look at that. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
The
you know.
Kyoto Brothers. A quick story. They were like my favorites.
Yeah.
I love John Beekler, who was my favorite effects artist ever. Gabe Bartalos, who did the Leprechaun and Basket Case 2. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And the Kyoto, obviously Critters, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Batteries Not Included. They're incredible.
They are.
And before I got that internship, when my school said, "Hey, there's no classes," I called the Kyoto Brothers, and Charlie Kyoto got on the phone with me, and I said, "I'll come sweep the shop. I'd like to work for free. I'll do whatever. You know, I'm a huge fan." And he said, "You need to go back to Pennsylvania and go to college." They had just done this movie called Pinata or something like that, and they turned the whole creature digital. And they're like,
Wow.
"All right, it's over. You go get out of here. Go back to college and find a real job." And I was like, "I didn't even finish high school. I'm not going to college." But then
That's so awesome.
I worked with him like 10 or 15 years later, and I told him that story, and he said, "I would never have said that to you. I never would have told you to pack." And I was like, "No, you did. It broke my heart."
That's a brilliant story. But no, I will definitely throw. It's called Quiets. It's coming out this year. I will definitely throw it in your direction.
Oh, I can't see it.
You
I
tell
love
us what you think of it. Might even ask some advice on it. Get some input on it.
Very cool. Very cool.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being on the show.
Yeah.
Keep in touch, and Well, I will post links in the description, guys, of where you can check out the award-winning, world-renowned Tom's. I nearly called you Tom Salvini then. Tom Devlin's Monster Museum out in Nevada. I'll be visiting it next year, and hopefully when I go over there, I'll be taking the camera around and showing you what it's all about. As long as it's okay with Tom.
Alrighty.
Right, peace out, brother.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
Yep.
See you again.